Europeans could save gaming, and I am not exaggerating. I wish it could be Americans, but it's not. So remember when Ubisoft pulled the Crew from all their store pages and then revoked people's license to own the game that they bought and paid for? So yeah, that pissed off a lot of people. And in response to that, people decided we need to do something about it because it's kind of insane. A company should not be able to revoke the license of a thing you bought and paid for. With no warning up front, by the way. They didn't say you were releasing the game. The Crew was a fully priced game you had to pay for up front to play it. And nowhere did it say you were releasing the game. So in response to that, a YouTuber named Accursed Farms and some people in Europe have made an initiative to stop this from happening. And I didn't know this was a thing in Europe, but it's honestly really cool. Assuming you set things up in the proper channels, you can make an initiative. And once that initiative gets 1 million signatures in the EU government is forced to look at it and make a decision, which I think is super cool, and all governments should work like this. Like, yeah, if you live in a democracy, you should be able to say, hey, fix this law. I have 1 million people who agree with me. Take a look at it at least. Now, I am going to link the initiative down below, so if you are an EU citizen, you can sign this. You don't have to live in the EU, you just have to be an EU citizen. But before you sign it, make sure all your information is correct. If it is not correct, the EU can simply say this signature is not valid, therefore we will not accept it, which is kind of stupid, but you know, and you can't just re-sign it either. If you mess it up one time, it's Jover. Your signature is void. So if you do end up signing this, make sure that it's all good. Make sure all your information is correct and all your ducks are in a row. Now, what exactly is its initiative hoping to do? It is hoping to stop companies from delisting and basically deleting games. So if a company sells you a game, including free-to-play with microtransactions, they can't just remove your license to play it and remove it from, like, your system, basically. Like, they can't stop you from playing the game if it kills support, because that's what Ubisoft did with the Crew. Instead of just letting people do whatever they wanted with it, they revoked the license to play it so you couldn't even launch the game anymore, which is ridiculous. If you pay for anything outright, it should never just be revoked from you. This includes all digital media. Subscriptions do not count, okay? You're paying for a subscription, it's different. Like, for example, there was recently a situation with Funimation. Basically, when you bought a Blu-ray anime, you would get a code to download it online. And that online version was from Funimation. And it wasn't exactly a download because you could only watch it on Funimation, but you had an online version that was from Funimation. And when Funimation and Crunchyroll merged, they removed all of these animes and movies that people actually paid for, like physically bought, and it was an alternate version. And you might be saying, why are they complaining? They have the physical version. What's the problem? Well, they still bought both versions. Like, it's advertised to have a digital version. They still paid for both versions. It'd be the same thing if a Sony guy came into your house after Crunchyroll bought Funimation and just stole your Blu-ray. It is the same thing. It's less invasive because it's online, but they're still stealing the copy you paid for. They paid for 2 copies, and they took away 1. That should be illegal. And I'm just saying, companies, if you want to stop piracy, that's a really bad way to do it. Why would anyone buy your stuff if you're going to take it away? You are literally begging people at that point to pirate your content. It's kind of brain dead. And realistically, if something like this doesn't come into play, people are just going to start pirating everything again, because what's the point in ever buying stuff if they just revoke it when you can just pirate it and always have it? Like, it's actually really stupid. These companies will do everything in their power to stop piracy, besides just having better business practices that make people want to support them. Because I wasn't always this adversarial when it came to companies. I've only become this adversarial because these companies have shown they're greedy and worthless, and they should be treated like animals. And if I didn't make it super clear earlier, this initiative applies to everything, so not just games. It would basically make it so companies can't make your stuff purposely obsolete, which is a good thing. If you disagree, I'm sorry, you're just wrong. Like, actually, you're just wrong. Like, if you want to buy a car one day and have it not work the next day, that's up to you, guy. I don't want that future. Now, I know I'm also American. This point has not lost me, so it's weird for me to be talking about this. And Accursed Farmers is also American, or I presume not EU, either Canada or America. American accent. Either way, since we have a global economy, this only benefits me because if this passes EU law, they're not gonna not do it in the US. It costs too much money to do 2 separate things like this. So it would basically apply to America as well. Which is why when the EU passes good laws, I'm happy about it, because usually it applies to here. Because those companies want to maintain operations in Europe, and it costs too much money to do 2 different things. So if they get privacy benefits in Europe, we sometimes get them over here, not all the time. Actually, most of the time we don't. But still, consumer laws that benefit the EU usually benefit the US and vice versa. And I used to not take gaming preservation super seriously, because when I grew up online, these companies didn't have their fall-off period yet, where they're getting desperate and annoying. But now that they're in their fall-off period and being desperate and annoying, it's pretty obvious that all these companies suck. So yeah, I'm sorry, Ubisoft, you cannot be trusted on your own. You have to be regulated. Because when we let you do whatever you want, you delete games that people paid for. And over the last 10 years, these companies have shown they have no regard for, like, the ownership of your media. Like, you paid for for it, you should own it. And that goes for all of them. Like, all these companies are the same. They're all stingy greedy, okay? So they need to be regulated so they can't do this stuff. And even when they're told they can't do certain things, sometimes they still just do them. Like Xbox Game Pass raising Game Pass prices after they promised the courts they weren't going to do that if they acquired Activision Blizzard. Or that time that Xbox also laid off a bunch of people at Activision when they said they wouldn't do that to acquire Activision Blizzard. So yeah, I welcome this initiative. And this initiative also does not affect any product currently still in support. So there is no reason not to support this bill in case you're worried about the companies for some reason, because while they support the product, they can do whatever they want still. This initiative will only apply if they pull support away from the product. So if you buy a game and Ubisoft doesn't want to support it anymore, they can't revoke your license. That's all this is doing. If they want to turn off the servers, they can still do that. They just cannot revoke your ownership. If they stop supporting the product, they can't revoke your ownership. And that goes for any product too. It's not just games. This initiative benefits literally everybody. So if you are in the EU, please sign it down below. I can't sign it. I'm American, as you can probably tell. And if you know people in the EU, spread it around, especially if you speak 2 languages, like if you're watching this video and you speak German or something, because apparently a lot of people in Europe don't speak English, which is honestly not that surprising. And I only speak English. So I am counting on you guys to spread it to people who don't speak English. Like, seriously, this is the easiest thing to do in the world. You fill out like your name and your address and like that's it. If this initiative gets passed, the world will just be a better place. Companies will stop making things obsolete when they don't want them to work anymore. Companies will be forced to stop making their products bricked, basically, to get you to buy the new one. Because imagine it's a car, dude. You buy a car and then 5 years later, they're like, we don't want to support this anymore. And then they brick it. This also would have prevented what happened with Spotify car thing. Like, for some reason, instead of just like leaving the software in their hands, they bricked them, which is insane. And they initially tried to do that with no refunds. And then after they got called out, they gave refunds for it. But those refunds were only Spotify premium credits, not actual money that they paid for it. So that's kind of ridiculous. But this initiative would have prevented that in Europe, at least. In the US, they might have done the same thing, but still, this benefits everybody, especially with digital media, because these companies are not going to get better as time goes on. They're going to get worse because all these companies have this idea of infinite growth in their heads. And the second they don't have infinite growth, they panic and they desperately do everything in their power to still grow. Even though that's incredibly unrealistic, at least quarter by quarter, that's incredibly unrealistic. But the more these companies have issues reaching their quarterly targets, they're going to do more stuff like this and get more desperate. And I mean, hopefully all these companies wake up and realize that infinite growth is actually impossible, at least in the way that they want it. And hopefully they stop being desperate and awful. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because as of recently, they've only gotten worse. So I link the initiative down below. If you're an EU citizen, please sign it, and also please share it around. And if you know anyone who is bilingual, who speaks English as well as whatever other language in Europe, especially you, please share it, because I can't communicate with those people. I'm an English speaker. I'm a dirty English speaker that barely speaks my own language. And I also link the Accursed Forums video down below if you want to watch over that. He goes into more detail about the initiative and what it covers and what it doesn't cover. And he also goes a little bit more into EU law and how the initiative works. He gives a little bit more information. I try to just cover my opinion on this and what you need to do, because like the actual specifics of the law in Europe, I don't really care about. I'm gonna be honest. I just want this initiative to pass so these companies can't just take stuff away when they feel like it, because they don't deserve the ability to do that. They don't. They offer no value anymore. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you're new. Follow me on Twitter @spatnz1 and click the answer down. Check out more of my content and have a good one.